Imagine an octopus the size of a couch, trailing shimmering rainbow capes through the open ocean like an underwater superhero. Oh, and her husband? He's the size of a walnut. This isn't science fiction. This is the Blanket Octopus, and she might just be the most metal creature in the entire ocean. And somehow, almost nobody knows she exists. The Blanket Octopus, specifically Tremoctopus violaceus, is the ocean's best-kept secret. While most people can name a dozen shark species and wax poetic about dolphins, this spectacular cephalopod has managed to remain virtually unknown despite being one of the most visually stunning and behaviorally bizarre animals in the sea. Why? Because she lives in the open ocean, far from coral reefs and coastlines where divers usually explore. She's a pelagic drifter, a nomad of the deep blue, which means human encounters are extraordinarily rare. In fact, the first blanket octopus was only formally described in 1829, and we've learned more about her in the last 15 years than in the previous 2 centuries combined. Today, we're going to explore 3 mind-bending aspects of this creature: her absurd size difference from males, her stolen chemical weapons, and her physics-defying defensive cape. By the end, you'll understand why marine biologists who study her describe their work with words like privilege and wonder. Because the blanket octopus doesn't just challenge what we think we know about octopuses, she obliterates those assumptions entirely. Let's start with the stat that makes every marine biologist do a double take. Female blanket octopuses can reach up to 6 feet long, that's 2 meters, with their blanket extended. The males, about 2.4 centimeters, less than an inch. Let me put that in perspective. If humans had the same size difference, the average woman would be about 5 feet 6 inches, and the average man would be roughly the size of a pencil eraser. The female blanket octopus outweighs her mate by a factor of 10,000 to 40,000 times. This is the most extreme sexual size dimorphism of any non-microscopic animal on Earth. This isn't just unusual, it's unprecedented. Even in other species with dramatic size differences, like anglerfish, where the male fuses to the female, we're talking ratios of maybe 150 or 1 to 100. The blanket octopus cranked that dial up to 11, then broke the dial off completely. For decades, scientists didn't even realize the males and females were the same species. When the tiny males were first collected, researchers classified them as completely different animals. It wasn't until DNA analysis in the early 2000s that we confirmed these miniature creatures were actually the same species as the magnificent females. But why? Why would evolution create such an extreme difference? The answer lies in their radically different lifestyles. Female blanket octopuses are apex survivors. They live for several years, travel vast distances across the open ocean, and need size and strength to defend themselves in one of the most dangerous environments on the planet, the pelagic zone, where there's nowhere to hide. Males, on the other hand, have exactly one job: find a female, mate, and die. They live for only a few months. They don't eat. They don't hunt. They're basically disposable delivery systems for sperm packets. In this context, being small is actually an advantage. You're harder for predators to spot. You can drift on currents with minimal energy expenditure, and you can develop faster. Dr. Christine Hufford, a cephalopod researcher at the Monterey Bay Aquarium Research Institute, describes it perfectly. The males are essentially flying sperm. They've given up everything: size, lifespan, complexity, to maximize their one chance at reproduction. When a male does encounter a female, which is extraordinarily rare in the vastness of the ocean, he uses a specialized modified arm called a hectocotylus to deliver his sperm packet, then detaches that arm entirely. The arm actually continues moving on its own, swimming into the female's mantle cavity. The male then drifts away and dies, his biological purpose fulfilled. It's brutal, it's efficient, and it's absolutely fascinating. Now let's talk about the blanket octopus's most badass adaptation: her immunity to Portuguese Man O'War venom and what she does with it. The Portuguese Man O'War is not technically a jellyfish. It's a siphonophore, a colonial organism made up of thousands of individual polyps working together. But that's not what makes it terrifying. What makes it terrifying is its venom, which contains a potent cocktail of toxins that can cause excruciating pain, welts, cardiac arrest, and occasionally death in humans. These tentacles can extend up to 165 feet, that's half a football field, and they remain venomous even after the man O'War is dead. Most marine animals give these creatures a very wide berth. Not the blanket octopus. Female blanket octopuses are completely immune to man O'War venom. Not resistant, immune. The venom that can drop a grown human has zero effect on her. And she doesn't just tolerate these creatures. She actively seeks them out, engages them in combat, and tears off their tentacles to use as weapons. Wait, it gets better. She doesn't have any specialized tentacle storage system. She just holds them in her suckers. Multiple tentacles, each still fully venomous, wielded like whips or clubs against anything that threatens her. Researchers have observed blanket octopuses brandishing these stolen weapons at fish, at divers, at anything that comes too close. Dr. Mark Norman, a senior curator at Museum Victoria in Melbourne, was one of the first scientists to document this behavior in detail. He describes encountering a female blanket octopus in the wild. She was holding man O'War tentacles in several of her arms, waving them around. It was like watching someone wield flaming swords underwater. But how is she immune? That's where the science gets really interesting. Research published in 2019 began to unravel this mystery. The secret lies in subtle differences in the blanket octopus's cellular receptors, the molecular doorways that venom uses to cause damage. In most animals, man O'War venom triggers these receptors, causing cells to fire, muscles to spasm, and pain signals to overwhelm the nervous system. In the blanket octopus, these receptors have evolved slightly different shapes. Think of it like a lock and key. The man O'War's venom is the key, but the blanket octopus has changed the locks. The venom molecules simply can't bind effectively to her cells, so they can't trigger the toxic cascade. This adaptation is so specific that it only works against man O'War venom. She's not immune to all venoms, just this one, which suggests that blanket octopuses and Portuguese Man O'Wars have been engaged in an evolutionary arms race for millions of years, with the octopus finally developing the ultimate defense. But stealing weapons from your enemy, that's not just defense, that's psychological warfare. Imagine being a predatory fish, considering whether to attack this weird floating octopus, and suddenly she's brandishing the very tentacles that have probably stung you before. The message is clear: I can handle what you definitely cannot. Scientists believe this behavior serves multiple purposes. Obviously, it's defensive. Few predators want to risk those tentacles. But it might also be offensive. There's speculation that blanket octopuses might use the tentacles to stun prey, though this hasn't been definitively observed. Given how rarely we see these creatures, there's likely much more to learn about how they use their stolen arsenal. Now let's talk about the feature that gives this octopus its name, the blanket. Female blanket octopuses have a large, flowing membrane that connects their dorsal and two lateral pairs of arms. When extended, this membrane unfurls like a cape, creating a dramatic, shimmering display that can make the octopus appear several times larger than she actually is. But this isn't just any cape. This is possibly the most iridescent structure in the entire animal kingdom. The membrane doesn't contain pigment cells like most colorful marine animals. Instead, it's covered in microscopic structures that manipulate light through interference, the same physics that creates rainbow patterns in oil, slicks, or soap bubbles. As the octopus moves, as currents shift the angle of sunlight, the colors flow and change across her blanket in hypnotic waves: purple, blue, pink, silver, gold. This is structural coloration at its finest, and it serves a crucial purpose. In the open ocean, there's nowhere to hide. No rocks, no coral, no vegetation. You're suspended in blue nothing, visible from every angle. For a creature trying to avoid predators, or conversely, trying to hunt, this is a nightmare. The blanket octopus's solution is counterintuitive, Instead of hiding, she becomes impossible to track. When a predator approaches, the blanket octopus spreads her cape to maximum extension. Suddenly, she's enormous, or at least she appears to be. A tuna, or wahoo that was considering a snack, now sees what looks like a creature too large to safely attack. But more importantly, the predator sees a creature whose exact shape, size, and position are impossible to determine. That shimmering, color-shifting surface confuses the predator's visual processing system. Our brains, and fish brains, use edge detection to identify objects. We find boundaries, we track movement. But when every part of your visual field is shifting color and intensity, when the edges seem to move independently of each other, your brain short-circuits. You can't accurately judge distance, size, or trajectory. Dr. Roy Caldwell, a marine biologist at UC Berkeley who has studied cephalopod vision for decades, explains, the blanket octopus has effectively turned herself into a living optical illusion. She's exploiting fundamental limitations in visual processing. It's extraordinarily sophisticated, but the blanket has another function that's even more dramatic. When threatened, the blanket octopus can detach large portions of her membrane, leaving them floating in the water as decoys while she jets away. The abandoned pieces continue to shimmer and move with the current, drawing the predator's attention while she escapes. And here's the kicker: she can regenerate the lost portions. Over the course of weeks or months, the membrane grows back, good as new. It's essentially a reusable decoy system, like a lizard dropping its tail, except more elaborate and more beautiful. This autotomy, the ability to self-amputate body parts, is common in many animals, but the blanket octopus has refined it into an art form. She's not just sacrificing a body part, she's sacrificing a carefully crafted lure that continues to function even after separation. So what does all this tell us about ocean ecosystems, evolution, and the state of our planet? First, the blanket octopus is a perfect example of how much we still don't know about the ocean. These creatures weren't described until 1829, their extreme sexual dimorphism wasn't understood until the 21st century, and their venom immunity was only explained in 2019. We're talking about a 6-foot-long animal with a sparkling cape, and we barely knew it existed. This should humble us. The ocean covers 71% of Earth's surface, and we've explored less than 20 of it. Scientists estimate there are potentially millions of marine species we haven't discovered yet. How many other blanket octopuses are out there? Creatures with abilities so extraordinary they seem impossible. Second, the blanket octopus's venom immunity opens doors for medical research. Understanding exactly how her cellular receptors resist Man O'War toxins could help us develop better treatments for jellyfish stings, which hospitalize hundreds of thousands of people annually. More broadly, studying how different animals resist or exploit venoms has already led to breakthroughs in pain medication, anticoagulants, and cardiac drugs. Third, there's the conservation angle. We don't know the blanket octopus's population status. We don't know their breeding rates, their geographic range with certainty, or how they're affected by climate change, ocean acidification, or plastic pollution. They're so rarely encountered that we can't establish baseline population data. This is deeply concerning because the open ocean, their habitat, is changing rapidly. Water temperatures are rising, currents are shifting, and the abundance of Portuguese Man O'Wars, their source of weapons, is fluctuating in ways we don't fully understand. Without basic knowledge of their ecology, we can't protect them, and we can't know if they're in trouble until it might be too late. Dr. Heather Judkins from the University of South Florida, who studies oceanic cephalopods, puts it bluntly, we're losing species before we even know they exist. Every time we discover something as remarkable as the blanket octopus, it should be a wake-up call. What else is out there? What are we losing? Finally, the blanket octopus reminds us that evolution produces solutions we could never imagine. Who could design a creature that steals jellyfish tentacles? Who would think to create a cape that works as both a size-amplifying display and a detachable decoy? Evolution doesn't follow human logic, it experiments wildly, and occasionally, it creates absolute masterpieces. The Blanket Octopus, 40,000 times larger than her mate, immune to deadly venom, armed with stolen weapons and wrapped in a rainbow cape, represents everything wondrous about the ocean. She's proof that reality is stranger and more magnificent than anything we could write. The next time you look at the ocean, remember, beneath that blue surface, there's a world of creatures so bizarre, so beautiful, and so brilliantly adapted that they might as well be aliens. And we're only just beginning to meet them. The Blanket Octopus isn't just surviving in the open ocean. She's dominating it, one stolen tentacle at a time.